All right. So, welcome everybody to Cinema and Conversation. Many of you have probably already been with us before, but if you haven't, welcome. So we are here with Lance Edmonds, a Mainer and director of Bluebird, which was hugely successful at MIFF in 2013. It was shot over the winter of 2012 in Millinocket, East Millinocket, and Lincoln. So about 9 years ago, right? 9 years ago? Wow.
Yeah, almost 2000. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
9 years
Yeah.
ago. um, Lance has directed several other films, Whiteout, which also screened at MIFF, Strays, and most recently The Seeker, which we will also chat about tonight, and we might have a special guest as well. So he has also edited episodes of The Wire, Lena Dunham's Tiny Furniture, and the animated feature Crypto Zoo, which premiered at Sundance this year. Congratulations. Um, and I was also looking at your IMDb page, and you have a special thanks for Old Joy. Do you have a Kelly Reichardt connection?
I do. Yeah, she was my professor and thesis advisor at NYU,
Oh,
where I went to film school, and so she, yeah, she was a really highly influential teacher for me. And then after I graduated, we stayed in touch, and Old Joy was a very very small film, probably like a $50,000 like very low budget film, and so she asked me to come in and help her do some editing stuff. So I was just out of film school at the time, and I came on, and I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. I remember she bought me like Mexican food, and I hung out with her and helped her do like sound exports or something. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, I was working with the production company that made that film at the time, and was friends with the cinematographer, and yeah, that's how that all happened. It was a super small movie, and sort of a family affair, so to speak.
wow. Honestly, eating Mexican food and editing with Kelly Reichardt is my dream.
Yeah, she's great. She edited that film herself, and I think a lot of, I'm not sure if her latest films she has done it that way, but I do the same thing. So I found that very cool, that she was a director who cut her own work, and it's something I did with Bluebird, which I co-edited, and the other films you mentioned I edited myself. And editing obviously is a big part of how I started in film, and one of my favorite parts of the process. So it was cool to see her in, at an early age, like just starting in the industry, seeing how she worked was really cool. So yeah, that was great.
Yeah, we were just talking about so we did a cinema conversation about Kelly Reichardt's filmography a couple weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
And we had a couple different professors who have done a lot of work on Kelly Reichardt come in and speak about her filmography. So people were able to watch whatever Kelly Reichardt film they wanted, and then we all came together and kind of compared notes. Um, so we were talking about like Bluebird and the landscape that it plays in Bluebird and your other films, and how that was sort of Kelly Reichardt-esque.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, that's very flattering that I would be compared to her at all. But I do love, in particular, the way her films do deal with a very specific place, and the way that the characters interact with that place. I mean, with her, a lot has been Pacific Northwest, obviously, and then obviously I'm interested in the Northeast. But I think that that's like a really powerful and interesting way to approach filmmaking, is to kind of take it very much from a point of view of the landscape that you're working in, and been very kind of location focused and location specific. Films have always been kind of my favorite movies, and yeah, I really kind of gravitate towards that sort of type of work for sure.
So we have so I just want to say to everybody, so this is your chance to ask any kind of questions you had about Bluebird, or if you watched the short film The Seeker, if you have questions about that. And also, Lance, apparently we have Kenneth available.
Great.
So should we bring him in and start talking about The Seeker?
Yeah, that's fine. We can start there, where, wherever. Let's,
Whatever, we can do
party.
whatever we want. Our show.
So I just made Kenneth a panelist, so he may be reappearing momentarily.
Oh, there he is.
There we go.
There we are. There we are.
All right.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome.
Oh, I see Annie's back there too.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm lurking.
Oh,
Hello.
My nephew's a big fan of Kelly Reichardt's, and what's the name of the film she did with the cows? I really want to see that one.
First cow.
Wow.
Thank you. We'll watch that. Okay.
Yeah, you guys would really love that movie.
All right.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to introduce you, Kenneth. So for those of you in the audience who haven't seen The Seeker, Lance, do you want to just sort of describe it? And
Sure. Yeah, it's a short documentary, and we filmed it over the course of like 2019 in a few different seasons. And it basically tells Kenneth's story, which is a very beautiful, fascinating, inspiring story about his life in the Amish faith, and subsequently leaving it and kind of remaking himself in a new mold, and with an environmental perspective and a really kind of fascinating philosophy of life. And it's a portrait, and it kind of is just kind of a thoughtful meditation on how you find your place in the world. And Kenneth's farm is out in Thorndike, and the whole film basically takes place on the farm and follows the process of through the seasons. We filmed in fall, we filmed in winter and summer, and shows all kind of the very fascinating processes that Kenneth uses to make furniture, some of which is using horsepower and a lot of kind of traditional Amish techniques, but how that kind of serves a new purpose in terms of, he has a really fascinating and wonderfully unique perspective on environmental responsibility and atheism, and finding meaning through the lack of faith, and how that sort of can lead you in a new direction. And it's overall just a portrait of him, and it's quiet, it's contemplative, and it's tries to ask questions and that sort of thing. So yeah, so that's what it is. It's a short documentary. It's about 20 minutes. It can see it now. It was made with a company called Topic, and it will be premiering on their streaming platform. But right now, it's available on Vimeo, and it played at the Camden Film Festival and won an award there. And it played at Tribeca and a number of film festivals all over the country. It's been very successful, and a lot of people have been very interested and inspired by Kenneth's story. So yeah, everyone should watch it who gets a chance.
so we have one question from Claire, and this is for Kenneth. So what was it like to be filmed and to have your story made public?
That's a good question. I have been filmed a few times before by some amateur filmmakers, actually when my family was still living with me. Lance, I believe I sent you that one short film. I don't even know the man's name anymore. He was from Canada, and he was on an assignment. I think he was in a filming school in the Camden or Down East area. And he somehow wandered out and found me. And most Amish are not really open to that. I was at that time. and he made it a very brief. Must not have been more than 5 minutes. So I did have that, and of course I grew up with photography from my parents, but I had been away from it for a while. So I was sort of a natural, but yet I had to go through a transition period, because there was a time when I wouldn't have posed for a picture in front of a camera. I was very staunch on that. But then as my faith began dissolving, then I began to see the blessings or the benefits of photography. I should say it's interesting, even in the most strict groups that don't allow being photographed, if you give them a book about the plain people, maybe some history book or something that shows pictures of different types of the sex, of the flavors of the Amish and Mennonites, they will pore over those books, and they seem very interested in the pictures. And when I saw that happening, I thought, well, somehow someone had to be humble enough to stand there in front of the camera. And instead of being a prideful thing, which they take it as being proud to have your image taken, or perhaps in violation of one of the 10 commandments of a graven image, it's actually a humbling experience to display and to provide the world to look into your life. It's like giving up some of your privacy, but for the fact that you know that just as much as anyone else, you have interest in people's stories, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question from Gregor, and this is for Lance. How did you find Kenneth, and making the film, did you try to interview his family or other members of the Amish community while making the film?
I found Kenneth because I actually read, there was in the Bangor Daily News a little article that was written about him, a little profile piece. And I think it had like a single photograph, or maybe it was a short video clip of him sort of loading hay. And I just thought the story just really kind of grabbed me right away. I thought it was very moving. I thought his perspective felt very unique and refreshing. And I also felt like visually, beyond just, it was a nice piece of journalism, but I also felt like it could be a film because I felt like it was so visual. And that's always a really important aspect to documentary work to me, is there's a journalistic aspect to it, but then also I want there to be a visual and emotional aspect. And I felt like this story deserved to be brought to life in a visual way, partly because of, I sort of imagined it in a way as like we were talking about earlier about Kelly Reichardt and about kind of landscape, the connection to the environment, the connection to the land itself, existing within a certain landscape and respecting it, was such a big part of this story that I felt like it really needed to be brought to life visually. So after reading this article, I think I emailed Kenneth or called him or something, and I set up a time to visit him at his workshop at Locust Grove Woodworks, where he works out of. And I went up there one time because I live in Brooklyn, but my whole family is still in Maine. And I was visiting them, and I made it a point while I was up there to take a day trip and go visit with Kenneth and talk to him and see if he thought that his story might make an interesting film, and to introduce myself and just to meet him and to hear, what kind of person he was, and whether he might be thinking about that or opening to that. And, we talked, and I was, I remember that, Kenneth, that you really opened up right away. You were such a forthcoming and honest person that it just felt so like, I just felt like that it would be wonderful to share the things he had to say. And I wrote a little sort of brief or a small short essay on what I wanted to do, and I shared it with him and kind of talked about how it might work, and what we might go about doing, and how to involve him in the process so that he felt like he was part of telling his own story. And we just kind of took it from there. And I think the first shoot that I did, I just paid for it all out of my own pocket and got a few friends together who, wanted to do it as a favor, and kind of scraped a little bit of money together to come up and film. And I used that as I cut that together into like a 2-minute film and used that to raise a little bit more money so that we could keep filming. And that's basically the story of how the film got made. Yeah, was there another part of the question? Sorry, I sort of went off on how it came together, but that's basically how we started making the film, and we sort of took it from there.
I think the other part of the question was involving
the other people in the family, and that's
and other representatives of the community, whether that was even part of the scope of the project.
Right. I mean, it was and it wasn't. It was early on, I think, when I was first exploring the ways to tell the story. Obviously that was a question, like how to incorporate that broader perspective. Who would the voices be? Would Kenneth be the only person we interviewed, or would it be kind of a broader portrait? And I think that early on, for several reasons, it started to make a lot of sense to me that I wanted it to be all told through Kenneth's perspective and through interviews that we did with him. And the way we did the interviews, they were just recorded on audio tape and edited together to sort of act as voiceover to what's very much a more verite, kind of poetic or lyrical exploration of him and his work on the farm. But I think that part of it was access and the things that Kenneth actually just talked about Amish and their perspective on photography and whether or not that's something that they will accept or not. And then also, Kenneth has a very specific relationship with his family, and I didn't want to, get in the middle of their relationship, and also like I didn't want to. It's a delicate situation, and I certainly didn't want to. It's a partly like a privacy thing, and partly like wanting to respect everyone who is involved in the story. It's for every documentary, there's kind of this question, right, of perspective and point of view, and how you want to tell that story and whose point of view you want to include. And I guess in this section, I wanted to keep it all within, Kenneth's point of view. And that was sort of where it came at. Again, both logistical, emotional, and kind of, the fact that, first of all, not all of his family are in Maine presently. And I wanted to really, like I said, keep the story focused on the farm. But those who are, I think it would have been, a sort of a comfort level thing with them as well. So.
Kenneth, I have a question for you. Lance had mentioned that his aim was really to bring you in as more or less a collaborative partner in your own story. What were some of the moments of collaboration that you remember that you value in the process?
Oh, good question. I appreciated their overall respect to my way of life and allowing me just to naturally go about my work. And they were sort of in the background, because there were times when I was actually quite busy, especially during haying season. I think Lance can remember that quite well, that I just had to work really hard at it. And I think the one day that they were here, I must have put in a 14-hour day just trying to get the fields cut and ready for harvest. And as you remember in the story, I work mostly alone, so I really have to keep things rolling. Just the general, I feel like I developed a friendship with Lance and his partner, Rachel. I believe it's Rachel, correct?
Sarah. You
Sarah.
always say Rachel, because it's like, it's the other one, right?
Yes. Sarah, thank you. Forgive me, Sarah. and just we built a friendship up, and that built confidence in me that I felt like my story would be told as best as can be in a short period of time, and that perhaps it could give a witness to a life well lived, but also with some deep and heavy challenges. That was, as you can tell through the emotional part of the story, it was heart wrenching. But I did make it through the other side, thankfully, and I'm grateful for that, and of course for my beloved partner Annie. So, yeah, it was interesting, and an interesting experience. I will definitely attest.
I mean, there were definitely parts where we would ask Kenneth to do something specific because we wanted to capture on film, and then there were other times where, like he said, I remember there was a day we had a whole plan of things to do, and that morning Kenneth called me. He's like, if I don't cut the hay today, it's going to rain, and my horses won't have food for months. And it was very like, it's a farm, it's a working farm, and so you have to be able to do the thing that needs to be done right in that moment. And it was a process of like having a plan, but then being able to throw it out the window when we needed to, so Kenneth could do the things that he did. And lucky enough for us, it's all incredibly interesting, beautiful work to me anyway. And it was lovely to capture it. And I think it sets a tone, and, to see him out there in that big field that he has with the horses working, to me, it gets me very emotional because it makes me think about, the life cycles of the crops, but then also him in this big universe, in a big main sky with the clouds above him. And I think thematically it makes me think about the things that he's talking about in the film too, just about finding a place within that world. So it was all great to capture, and Kenneth was so forthcoming, and like I said, so open to letting us work, that it was such a joy to be there. And I miss the farm, I miss Thorndike, I miss being in town and being up there.
Well, you're welcome anytime, Lance.
I'll be back. I'll be back.
I should add that there were some times that I was pretty self-conscious. I had never, basically in some of the scenes I had to do a bit of acting, where like I was buttoning my shirt up, and I kind of had to play the part, and I'd never done that before. But as you know, in the film, in my story, I learned to enjoy music and film, and so I thought to myself, I guess this is what it's like to be acting, and I got a little taste of that. But I was rather nervous and self-conscious, very much so.
It doesn't show at all.
Lance was very patient with me. The whole crew was patient with me, and we got through it.
All right. Well, I do want to talk Bluebird. And so if anybody else has questions for Kenneth or about The Seeker, the short film, definitely put those in. But I think in the meantime, Mike,
Can I ask one more?
Oh yeah.
It makes sense to pivot to Bluebird? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask
Sorry about that.
Lance. So I mean, I think everything that you're saying, about being on the farm and just capturing this really unique story. What was your decision? How did you reach the decision to shoot it on film? And what impact do you think that made for the overall film?
Yeah, that was a decision I made early on, and I think it had to do with a couple things. One is, I love film. It's Bluebird was shot on film. I do, whenever I can, I shoot on film, just because I think it's like, I just love the way it looks. I love the process. But I think in particular, I'm always looking for ways to meld form and content, and to really kind of have a way where the way you make the film and the way the film looks and feels has something to do with what the film is about, right? And I think with this particular story, I think there was this sense of like, you know, Kenneth is making, you know, pieces of furniture with actual horses and horsepower. So he's got this very old methodology and a way that is kind of craft heavy and more difficult, but ultimately like, you know, interesting. And in some ways I wanted to respect his craft and his way of doing things by doing something that was similarly kind of old school and a little bit throwback, and had that kind of like textural quality to it. You know, 16 millimeter feels a little bit out of time and a little bit timeless. I think we visually we associate that with older films and films that feel slightly timeless, and I feel like that really brought to life the timelessness of what it's like to be there and being on the farm, and the sort of Amish point of view, which is very much you know, hovering around the mid 19th century as far as like the types of tools and things they use. So I wanted the film to be like, maybe you just look at a still and you're like, is this a Western from like, you know, the that's set in the 19th century, or, and then all of a sudden you see an electric car or Kenneth using his iMac or something, and then it's like there's this sort of shocking disconnect, and that's very much a part of his story. And I think that like the way it looks and feels, I hope sort of makes it, you know, brings that to life a little bit. So it was really all of those things. And I also like, documentary is so rarely photographed on film these days, that I think it just separates it a little, you know, a little bit visually from other films, and makes it stand out a little bit and feel a little bit more unique. You know, not only did we shoot it on 16 millimeter, but we filmed it with these special Panavision lenses that made it into widescreen. There's only 2 of these lenses in the world, and Steven Soderbergh had them built, and they're really unwieldy and difficult to use. But again, like I wanted that in a way. Like the challenge of it was, I think, part of the process. And again, like just wanting to kind of go toe to toe with Kenneth's craft, and try and up my own craft a little bit and make it a little bit harder for myself, but also a little bit more beautiful and a little bit more handmade.
Yeah, I just think it was such a beautiful way to capture those images, and I think the fact that all of us who've seen the film have experienced it digitally, it still carries that granularity that you can only get with film, and I think it just totally amplifies the landscape, the people, the you know, the very analog hard work that goes into the making of it. So
Right.
yeah, I just really appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we got to talk about that, because that's always so so that's an important part of the film to me, and something I care deeply about.
All right. So yeah, so post your questions about BLUEBIRD in the Q&A. And I'll just start off with one of my own about casting. Tell me the story about like, how did the casting go? How did you get these actors, and what was that like?
Sure. So casting was an interesting process. We had a really great casting director by the name of Susan Shopmaker, who kind of walked me through the whole process and how to go about it. It was my first film, obviously, and so I was new to the whole process with working with, you know, actors that were well known and who were somewhat famous, and the rest of it. So I didn't really know what I was doing. So she was very key in helping me put those pieces together. The film is cast I always think of it as an ensemble film. So I never really thought that there was a lead actor and then a bunch of smaller roles to cast around. So it was kind of always about putting together an ensemble and putting together a family that felt authentically a family, and also that they all kind of balanced each other out and made sense as a group, which is a slightly different perspective on casting a film when it's kind of an ensemble film like that, is they have to kind of like you can't really like have one person really outweighing another person, or like it's a very like delicate balancing process. So like it was everyone who we cast was cast in a slightly different way. Someone like John Slattery, I knew his work so well. I was such a huge fan of Mad Men. He's from Boston, and he grew up going to Maine, throughout his life. So he knew the world a little bit. And so for him, casting him was as simple as having a phone call and talking about the character. Whereas some of the other roles, we had auditions and, multiple people reading for it and seeing who fit, who's the best piece. And then we even had a role in the film who was with Brandon Wardwell, who plays the boyfriend of Emily Mead's character, Paula, and he's from Lincoln. So we actually cast him during an open casting call that we held at the University of Maine, Orono. And we had a few hundred people come into that casting call and read for all sorts of different roles. And so we ended up casting him. So he's a local actor, never done anything outside of high school theater. And he was acting with Emily Mead, who's, well known, has been on Boardwalk Empire and The Deuce and all these other shows, and is well known in the television film world. So, it was a really interesting mix. And Adam Driver, who has since become quite famous, was, just at the time sort of fresh out of Juilliard and a friend of mine, and came on and agreed to do the part over just a couple days. So, there's like a big mix, and it all kind of, everything came together in a different way. Amy Morton I knew from film and theater, and she was a director as well and had directed theater and was obviously amazing. So I was very grateful to have the people I did and was able to work with them. And it was great. I love casting. I love actors. It's one of the most fun parts of the process, but also very stressful, but fun to see it come to life, and with a story you've been living with for so long, and you've heard these voices in your head, but to see an actual human being embody them is always like kind of my favorite part of the process. But it's also very like, casting can be very stressful as well. It's just because I'm going through it again on my next movie, and it can be a stressful process also. So, but luckily with that one, it was pretty painless, I would say.
Yeah, how did the idea for this story come up?
BLUEBIRD came from a few different things kind of mixing together. It came from like a personal experience and personal story, as far as like the inciting incident of a boy who's left behind on a bus. Was a story that I had always carried with me because it had happened to my brother when he was in kindergarten. It didn't end in a kind of tragic denouement as it does in BLUEBIRD, but it was always a sort of something that stuck with me, that he had fallen asleep on a school bus, and everyone panicked and thought he had disappeared for several hours until they found him back at the bus depot, still fast asleep on the bus seat a few hours later. And it was always this kind of funny story within my family, kind of a joke. But I sort of thought, what if my mother were not there to sort of pick him up from the bus stop? What if circumstances had been slightly different and the family had reacted in a slightly different way? Like how could this have spun out into a totally different situation? And so that was sort of an interesting jumping off point. And then the other side of it was just kind of wanting to make a film set in kind of the Penobscot region and kind of that part of the state, which was, and I guess still is, continuing to face a lot of economic uncertainty because of the closing of the paper mills and the way that the sort of economy has really shifted and decimated a lot of parts of not only Maine, but the whole country, where manufacturing has really evaporated and the economy is totally disintegrated. And making a film about different people and how they're dealing with a totally a landscape and a world that has changed from beneath them, and how people react, and how people sort of how that can affect them personally and spiritually, and what you do with that feeling. So yeah, it was really kind of all these different ideas and different feelings and images commingling and kind of into this stew of the screenplay, and it evolved over many years, and evolved continually while we were shooting it, and became something even different when we were editing. And so it's for Bluebird, I wouldn't say that there was one lightning strike of an inspiration, but rather several different interests of mine kind of all kind of mixing together.
And also I was noticing the score in this film is like, it does a lot of work. It's a really, it's very present, and it really carries a lot of the scenes. Was that like, what's the story behind the score?
Yeah, the score, I love the score. I got to work with two composer acquaintances of mine who are really great, Sandra Jurians and Danny Bensi, who are super, super talented. Since then, they've done a lot of awesome stuff. I think they did the Ozark score. At the time, they had done a few films of friends of mine that I really, really loved. Score to Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, which I thought was really beautiful and interesting. A friend of mine made a documentary called Northern Light that was set in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That was a very kind of frozen, stark landscape, and I felt like the way that music sounded against that landscape really felt appropriate to me. They're very much, as composers, they compose on strings a lot of time. Like a lot of composers will start on a piano and develop a theme, and then kind of build that out and decide what instrumentation that'll come from. But they're kind of rare in that they start a lot of their composing on strings. Sandra Danny rather, is a cellist by kind of training, and I thought that that was a really interesting place to start writing from, to really start from something more orchestral. So their style is very unique, and I think really beautiful, and I felt like it fit the world of this movie really well. And I really love the score. I think they continue to do amazing work. They're super talented guys. Again, another great part of the filmmaking process is the score process, and working to create those moods and stringing through the movie and see what's working, what's not working. Some of my favorite Bluebird memories are of sitting in their studio and changing instrumentation, or taking a piece out or putting a piece in and making that all work. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those guys and what they did on the score.
Wow, that's so cool. We have a question from Gregor. How did you get Margo Martindale in the film? Among her many roles, viewers may remember seeing her in a different Made in Maine film, Blow the Man Down, at MIFF in 2019.
Correct, yes. I saw Blow the Man Down at MIFF in 2019. Yeah, I don't know, she's just awesome. I think I think that was through my casting director, again, like just making an offer, saying, we think you'd be great in this. And she luckily responded to the material, and came out and worked with us. One of the advantages we had on Bluebird, I think, was that because it was an ensemble film, we never needed people to make huge time commitments to come and shoot the film. So like, I think Margo worked for, maybe a week or something, because, her role in the film is, she has a big presence in the movie, but in terms of like her scenes are all kind of concentrated in one part of the movie. So it was really to our benefit that we were able to get people to work around their schedule and to really get them for like a very concentrated period of time. And we were lucky that she had a little window for us. So didn't hurt that we were shooting in February, which is like not a super busy time otherwise. So we were able to get access to a lot of great actors that maybe otherwise we wouldn't have been able to.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Does she have a main connection other than filming
No,
these?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, yeah, not really. I mean, like I don't, yeah, and not that I remember. I don't think she has. I think she's just, you know, she's just such a great character actor, and she's like, has so many great sort of kind of meaty character roles and kind of like small town, big presence in a small town kind of roles, you know, like Blow the Man Down, or like I think of like Nobody's Fool or something like that, you know, where it's sort of like has that small town milieu, and she like fits so well into it. Her like sort of thing just works so well. So maybe that's just why we see her in a lot of stories like that.
All right, we've got a question from Claire. Filming in this Maine weather and landscape, how did that happen? Were you all freezer pops?
Yeah, we kind of were freezer pops, to be honest with you. I mean, there were some days that were pretty brutal, but you know, Bluebird. I mean, you know, even on the Seeker too, it was cold when we shot. We're shooting in winter, but it wasn't even close to what we were dealing with on Bluebird, because I remember one day in particular, because when we were shooting the scenes, the logging scenes, we were really like on a logging site. So we were a good like 3 miles down a road into the forest. And it was February, like I said. And so it was like pretty brutal. Like we were an indie movie. Like we didn't have trailers. We didn't have anywhere warm to go when we were shooting out there. We could sort of like sit in cars to warm up, or like in a van, but that was it. And it was so, there's some pretty funny behind the scenes pictures that you might be able to find online from shooting that, where everyone is in like full Arctic gear. It looks like we're kind of like on a trip to the moon or like Antarctica or something. Like it was really intense. And I remember in particular, there was one day we were shooting on a logging site, and I went over to the van and got myself a cup of coffee, and we set the shot up, and then I went to go drink it, and it had frozen. So it was like it had gone from being a hot cup of coffee to like an ice coffee in the time it took for me to like walk from the van to set. And that was like, it was really, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm still sort of like PTSD and some of the cold from that shoot, because it was like really brutal at times. And I really owe a lot to my crew for sticking it out, because it was not such a friendly environment, to be sure. I promised them all I would make a movie in Hawaii at some point, just to pay them back. Yet to be done. I don't know. But there's something about being there and being in that world that kind of, I don't know, as hard as it is, I think actors like to have something to fight against a little bit too, like something to use. I mean, it informs your performance in a way, you know. There's just kind of like an ache to it that is just omnipresent, and I think that kind of finds its way into the performances in some way. I don't know.
That's so interesting. Wow. How do you think, like, you're living in New York now, and you've been, I mean, you haven't been living in Maine for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how, like, in the crazy world of New York and LA, and you know, the all the shininess that goes on in those places, the movie business, what do you think, like, being a Mainer, how does that set you apart? What does that give you? Does it give you anything, any special quality or skills?
Well, I keep coming back to Maine for stories. I can't help myself somehow. I keep saying like the next thing I work on, the next thing I write, like won't have anything to do with Maine, and then it does. And I'm trying my
Always come
best
back
to.
here. We will welcome you.
Oh well, good. Because I've got a few more.
Great.
Yeah, I think I just really, when I moved to New York. I mean, first of all, I do love Maine. I have obviously a genuine love for it, but I couldn't wait to get out of there, when I was 18, and wanted to move to New York City, and where everything was happening and where I thought all my people were, and where I wanted to make movies. And I love Martin Scorsese, and I wanted to take a bite out of the Big Apple, or whatever. But then I got here and I sort of started thinking about what makes my point of view different than everyone else here and everyone else making films. And I kept sort of getting drawn back to where I grew up and my experiences there, and mining them for drama, for the love of the way the landscape looks and the ocean. And I kept drifting back there when it came time to write a story. And I just sort of naturally started developing projects that took place there for that reason. And I continue to do so to this day. I think it's just how much it affected me growing up. And like I said, my family still lives there. And so I'm back there all the time and continue to explore and continue to find new towns and new places there and new things that continue to fascinate me. So, and one thing, inevitably leads to another. With Bluebird, I was interested in the Katahdin region and the mills, and like I said, about sort of towns that had changing economies and this kind of thing, which naturally led me to learn more about the logging and timber industry, which has in turn made me fascinated with kind of like Thoreau's travelogue writings about Katahdin. And now I'm researching something that takes place in Maine in the 19th century, in the sort of logging world of Maine and the Penobscot river driving that happened in the 19th century. And then that led me to discover a Native American baseball player that was from Indian Island outside of Bangor, and went on to become the first Native American baseball player, and the Cleveland Indians are named after him. And so I'm exploring a potential documentary, and now that has a Maine connection. So I keep sort of like finding a new thing that really fascinates me, that leads me to another thing. And one day I swear I will make something that takes place in the desert, or like I said, Hawaii or something. But for now, I keep returning to the Maine landscapes because there's just so many good stories. There's so many good. My next film takes place on an island in Maine. It's a fictionalized island, but again, like the island lifestyle in Maine, like living on an island, lobster fishing. There's just so many unique, specific, and yet universal stories that can be told in the state of Maine. I have a hard time leaving, I guess, sort of emotionally, even though physically I've done that. Emotionally, maybe not so much.
I don't blame you. It's hard to leave. So even with we have one question asking about the tax breaks, or the lack of.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So is that like, I know that that's a huge reason why, people don't shoot in Maine, but what's your stance on that?
This was such a painful thing. I mean, with Bluebird, like, it was really, first of all, that was a low budget movie. So tax breaks were never like a big part of our production plan, but it was tough to convince people that like we didn't. So many people were like, you sure you can't do this in Massachusetts somewhere, like Canada, like, you'll get 20% of your budget back, in credits. And I fought to shoot that movie in Millinocket and around there, because I just said that it couldn't be, this was what the movie was about. It didn't make any sense to go somewhere else. but the more money that's at stake, the harder it just becomes to justify. And I find it deeply disappointing. I guess my point of view is like, either every state should have these tax credits, or none of them should. Like, I would also be fine if no states had it, because then there wouldn't be this pressure to like focus on a specific area that will give you the credits. It's like, if they got rid of all of them, I'd be fine, because then it wouldn't matter where you shoot. It would be whatever was appropriate for the story. But because it's like some places have it and some don't, it ends up being this weird thing where everything is shot in suburban Georgia, or like for a time everyone was shooting in New Orleans, and then they got rid of their credits, so then everyone went to Detroit, and then so there are these. It's like, and for someone, this kind of brings it full circle in a way. Like, for someone who's so interested in a specific place and in a specific landscape, it's really heartbreaking when people are like, well, can't you just do it somewhere else? Because it's like, no, that's not the point. That's not the reason I wrote this. So it's really kind of like a dagger in the heart of people who kind of like are dead set on making their, whatever. It could be their like Idaho story, or like their Oregon story, or whatever. Like, it's just, then they all of a sudden it's sort of like, okay, what's the Canadian equivalent? Like, like there was this island movie in Maine, like my producers want to shoot in Halifax, because Canadian tax credits are so good. Obviously I would rather like, go to like Vinyl Haven or something, but it's like, there's just these yeah, I could go on all day about it. I mean, there's times where I have these like daydreams where I stand up in front of the Maine legislature or something, and I'm like, you have to do this state is beautiful, like people will come, like if you build it they will come, and I do believe they will, but like it can be politically really hard to justify, and I get that too. I get, it's not, there's other things that people need money for and tax breaks for, so maybe it's not it's just one of those things, it's one of those battles. Yeah, I wish it were different. I wish it could be different.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we've got lots of agreement in the chat here. Kenneth says Maine is definitely film worthy. More should be made there. Sad it's not film friendly. It always makes me a bit sad to learn after the film that it wasn't made where it was portrayed.
I know.
Yeah, it's always sort of like, oh, this is so cool, and then you go on and Google like so and so film locations, and it's like California.
Honestly, like Stephen King there's always like 3 or 4 Stephen King TV shows or movies every year that I feel like he could almost like do some sort of like, how Tyler Perry has like a huge compound in Atlanta, and it's just like, $1 billion like Tyler Perry industry. Like, you could do that with Stephen King maybe in Maine, if he just said every adaptation you just have to shoot it at this like studio outside of Portland or whatever, and that's just like where they're all made. Maybe then, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, maybe that's how it gets done. You just have like one, and they shoot all the Avengers movies in Atlanta also. Like, you just need that, but for Maine, and then maybe that's how it happens. Who knows? I don't know.
It's a great idea. This is the start of a business proposal, I think.
Yeah, someone get Stephen King a letter or something. Give me a
right. So there was another question that I was going to ask. Oh yeah, so this is from Sarah Gleason. Did you set out to make an emotionally crushing movie, or did it just evolve into that?
Yeah, maybe it evolved into, or maybe I didn't realize how crushing it was in the beginning, and then after I made it, maybe that's when when I realized it. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that I think with Bluebird, I think that there is, to me, it ends in a place that's uplifting, but realistically uplifting, in the sense that like none of the problems presented in the movie are, in my opinion, like immediately solvable in a way that I feel like would be emotionally truthful or even narratively truthful. I think the brokenness that the people in the film experience and live through is not going to be solved in the 2-week time frame that the movie takes place in. I think the economic woes of Katahdin region aren't going to be solved anytime soon. I think these are questions that will continue to haunt the people in the movie and the world at large. And I guess I sort of like got to the place with the movie where, you know, I didn't want to tie it all up with a neat bow and give it an ending where everyone felt like, you know, in this hour and a half they broke through the walls and everything came out hunky-dory in the end. I felt like I wanted there to be a gesture towards, okay, there are some like the family is together at the end of the film physically, even though there's a lot of healing to happen. I think it's just about a baby step. You know, I used to say that Bluebird, you know, some movies go from 1 to 10. I think Bluebird goes from like 1 to 3 as far as like emotional evolution. But to me, that was the space I wanted to work in for the film. You know, it was a small movie about very small changes. Yeah, so I think there's hope for the characters in the film. I just think it's not happening quickly.
Fair enough. All right, so I think unless we have any last questions, we're probably gonna wrap it up pretty soon. So Mike, do you have any other questions, or anybody in the chat have any questions?
No, I
For-
just
Yeah,
I
either
saw
Blue
one about
or-
when is the casting call for your island film happening? That was in the chat box, and I'm just
Yeah.
personally curious.
Hopefully, I mean, my goal with that film is to shoot it in September. So, you know, if everything goes according to plan, sometime late summer. But we're trying to cast it and get money for it right now. Another sort of like haunting movie, but a little bit more, it's a mystery. So, you know, it's a foggy island mystery. So anyone who's interested in that kind of movie, yeah, come out for it. Hopefully we'll shoot it in September would be ideal.
I like it. Bring it to Maine when you can. We'll show it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Of course. My parents are going to want to see it, I'm sure, and they don't leave. So it'll have to screen somewhere there.
Can I ask where you're from? I don't know if we touched on this.
Oh, I'm from Kennebunk.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, my sister lives in Portland, and yeah, I love it. Love it all.
Nice. Well, I think that's it for us. Lance, this has been amazing. You brought a special guest. This has been.
No, I was so happy Kenneth could come. I don't know if you're still in the chat,
Thank
Kenneth.
you,
But
Kenneth. Wow, what an incredible event. I mean, rarely do we ever get to talk to the star of the movie as well as the director in the same night. So this has been a real treat for our audience, and it'll live on for people to watch on YouTube on our channel in the future. But best of luck to you, you know, with everything you have going on, especially being a filmmaker during COVID and all of the other stuff. You know, really appreciate you making some time for us.
yeah, of course. I mean, this has been a difficult year, obviously, and with The Seeker in particular, it was to premiere almost exactly a year ago at Tribeca, and that's right when everything fell apart. And it's always been really disappointing that I haven't been able to share it in a theater, you know, and see people's reaction. And I keep saying to Kenneth, like, I can't wait to like show this and have you, you know, live talk to people and get to meet you. And I still think that'll happen. So Once this all goes away, I know that Points North and Camden is interested in doing another screening. Perhaps I'll be able to even bring it to Waterville, to MIF. So anyone who's interested in seeing the film on a big screen, I think it's worth seeing on a big screen. I would, it's going to be great if Kenneth can come and talk to people, and I know I want him to see it on a big screen, and but this is, in the meantime, stuff like this is really great, and I'm really happy you guys invited me, and glad you're organizing stuff like this. So it keeps the movies at least somewhat personal.
Absolutely. And so everybody, so next Cinema and Conversation is going to be on March 31st, same time, 7:30. And we're going to host the director of Stray, which is a documentary about stray dogs in Turkey. So we're going to host Elizabeth Lowe, who's the director, and that'll be a really interesting conversation. So check out our website for that information. And also check out our website if you want to see The Seeker or any of Lance's other films online. Definitely worth a watch. So yeah, so thank you so much, Kenneth and Lance, and we'll see you all next time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Take care.